A 14-year-old victim of child exploitation, murdered.
She's missed out on everything, all her life ahead of her.
That day will always haunt us.
A father deliberately run over. And exclusive access to the hunt for one of Britain's worst serial killers.
The results were truly staggering. We were left in absolutely no doubt that evidence identified the killer.
Live for the next hour, this is Crimewatch. Hello and welcome to Crimewatch. We are live for the next 60 minutes with the latest crime investigations, news and appeals. We have detectives from across the country standing by the phones, all hoping that you can help solve their cases tonight.
Including the hunt for a gang of rapists who attacked a 17-year-old as she made her way home.
I just remember trying to walk straight, trying to ignore them. I knew something bad was happening, but I couldn't do anything about it.
And I need your help to track down this lot. Amongst the men wanted for kidnap, drug dealing and huge frauds. Plus, in our CCTV roundup, can you identify this mesmerizing thief who seems to have an eerie control over his victim?
Well, we start tonight with the case of murder and what we now call child sexual exploitation. The organised grooming of children for sex has become a major news story over the last year, with 13 men jailed for grooming girls in Bristol just last week. Well, back in 2003, 14-year-old Charlene Downs from Blackpool vanished. The case was marred in controversy from the start, with widespread allegations of child abuse in the town and failings in the subsequent police inquiry. But now there's a fresh investigation with a new team of detectives who we can reveal are tonight launching a staggering £100,000 reward for information which helps finally bring Charlene's killer to justice.
Not knowing, that's the hardest part. That day will always haunt us.
She's missed out on everything, all her life ahead of her. Such a waste.
It's just left a big hole in everybody's hearts and minds.
Charlene was 10 years old when she moved with her family to Blackpool.
She loved music, she loved animals, and she loved her family. And she just loved life, really.
She was very cheeky, very cheeky indeed. A typical teenager.
She got on well with all her siblings, but the closest one to her was Rebecca. They were like just twins, really. They were lovely together.
She was my best friend.
But in November 2003, Charlene disappeared.
It was cold, wet, 11 years ago. It was a Saturday. We had our pocket money, we had some money. Went for a bit of a gamble, as we used to call it. We had a laugh and a giggle down in the arcades, on the seafront. Just doing what teenagers do. Went to Mackie D, she loved McDonald's, strawberry milkshakes. Yeah, strawberry milkshake.
Hi, can I give you a leaflet?
Oh, thanks.
Thank you.
I used to work for an Indian restaurant giving out leaflets, and it was about 7:15 that night. I always remember it. It was a dark November, miserable night. It was horrible. And I saw Rebecca with Charlene coming up Church Street. They both came over to me.
Hi, girls.
How's it been going, flying?
Not too bad.
Yeah?
Rebecca said, well, I'm going home now. Are you coming, Charlene? And Charlene said, well, no, I want to meet my friends.
All right, bye. See ya.
Charlene called her friends from a nearby phone box and then waited with her mum until they arrived.
Okay, don't be too late. Okay,
All right,
see you.
see you in a bit.
Nice time. Bye.
She said, love you, Mum. I said, love you too. And she walked off in the direction of the Winter Gardens. And I've never seen her since. Never.
Charlene was with her friends for only a short while. They spent around 20 minutes together before going their separate ways. It's not known exactly what Charlene did for the next hour or so, but she did meet up with another friend later that evening. At around 9:30 p.m, the pair headed to the Carousel Bar on the North Pier. Charlene was a regular visitor and often came to watch bands play. But on this night, the girls didn't stay long. At around 10 o'clock, Charlene and her friend walked back into the town centre. An hour or so later, they said their goodbyes and parted company. This was the last confirmed sighting of Charlene before she disappeared. Although her body has never been found, police are convinced she was murdered. 11 years on, we still don't know what happened to Charlene.
There isn't a day that don't go by that we don't think about her, miss her. Yeah. And because we can't see her doesn't mean we can't talk to her. But I know it's a murder investigation, but she's gone but never forgotten. Just come forward, it's never too late. It never is too late. Anything's better than nothing. We ain't got, like, obviously, maybe a lot, but we're just a family and we need answers. Anything's better than nothing.
I urge you to come forward with any information, anything at all, no matter how small. Please do give us some closure and some peace. And above all, please give Charlene some justice.
Well, she is gone, but not forgotten. With us tonight is Detective Superintendent Andrew Webster, who is heading up this new team and this new investigation. As we mentioned, there were significant mistakes in the police response to this initial case. What's changed now?
Well, we recognise that we've made mistakes previously, but we now have a dedicated team looking at this, trying to establish what's happened to Charlene, and we're determined to get answers for her family.
That's really important. Now, as I said, £100,000 reward, that is, by anybody's standards, an enormous sum. Why so much?
I believe this is a life-changing sum of money, and I believe that somebody out there knows what happened to Charlene, and I hope this prompts them to come forward and tell us to get answers to this case.
Well, let's dig a bit deeper on that. Who are you appealing to tonight?
I particularly want to speak to the friends and associates of Charlene in 2003. They were teenagers then, they're in their 20s now, some of those will be parents. I'm hoping that that period of time that has passed will make them more comfortable and confident to come forward, and I have a team of specialist detectives waiting for their call.
OK, that's important. So, you've revealed this £100,000 reward, but also you want to show us some never-before-seen in public CCTV. Just take us through this, Andrew. What is it you think that you're seeing here, and why is it so important?
This is the CCTV from the 1st of November 2003, and we have a confirmed sighting of Charlene that evening with a lady with dyed blonde hair in her 30s with a three-quarter length black coat, and we need to trace that woman. So if that woman is you, or you know who she is, I'd urge you to come forward and speak to us and tell us who she is so we can take this case forward. OK,
Detective Superintendent Andrew Webster, thank you so much for updating us on this very important case. As you've heard, It's been 11 years of agony for her family. Surely it's time we finally knew what really happened to Charlene. Please, I would urge you, call our studio now on 0500 600 600 if you can help in any way at all. Wanted Faces now with Martin.
And our first 3 wanted faces tonight are all considered dangerous, so please don't approach them, just dial 999. We start with Kevin Okoro. Detectives want to trace him in connection with several incidents which happened over 3 days last December, during which a man was kidnapped, beaten and tortured, and 3 others were robbed and attacked with chains and wooden bats. He's also wanted for questioning in relation to the large-scale supply of crack cocaine and heroin across Norfolk and Suffolk. 29-year-old Okoro, who also uses first names Kieran and Efosa and the street name Kay, has links to Ipswich, Norwich, Reading and London. Next up is this man, Daniel John Wynne. He was given an indeterminate jail sentence in 2007 after he attacked a stranger in the street, punching and kicking him and leaving him with a broken jaw and nose. On the 25th of October this year, Wynne absconded from the prison in Gloucestershire where he was serving his sentence. The 29-year-old has links to South Wales and speaks with a Welsh accent. He has a 1-inch scar on his chin and several large scars on his forearm. He also has the name Danny tattooed on his left arm. Number 3 tonight is Shaquem Andrew Rock, although he's also known as Shem. Detectives want to question him after a man was threatened in his own home and then tortured, causing what police describe as horrific injuries. The victim's bank cards were later used to withdraw money. 21-year-old Rock has links to the Wirral area of Merseyside. And finally, for now, detectives want your help in finding this man, Ian Kevin Oldham, although he also calls himself Iggy or John Oldham. He's wanted for questioning in relation to an organised crime group believed to be involved in the importation into the UK of Class A and B drugs. The 36-year-old has a Midlands accent and the initials JJ tattooed on his right arm, as well as 2 scars on his left arm. He has connections to Nottingham and Skegness, but where is he now? If you need to take another look at all of these faces, they're all on the website, and if you know where any of them are, call and text the numbers on screen. Calls are free from most landlines. Some networks and mobile operators will charge. Texts will be charged at your standard message rate.
A roundup of the latest crime news now, starting with figures showing a rise in the number of violent homophobic attacks across the UK in areas including London, Manchester and South Wales. There have been more than 300 such attacks in London alone so far this year. Greater Manchester Police have released this CCTV showing an unprovoked homophobic attack on a gay rugby player in the city's Canal Street on November the 1st. The victim needed surgery for a broken jaw after this vicious punch. Police are appealing for your help to identify his attacker and for any witnesses seen in the footage to come forward. Full details are on our website. Now, drink drivers are set to be named and shamed on Twitter during this year's festive season. Sussex and Surrey police will be live tweeting the names during their December roadside checks. Officers on dedicated patrols will target drink and drug drivers, as well as responding to tip-offs from members of the public. Finally, we've all heard the excuse about the dog eating your homework, but what about the dog that was caught speeding? Jordan Wynne was jailed for 13 months last week for driving at almost 100 miles an hour in a 30 zone. After this police chase, Wynne was finally pulled over, but blamed his canine companion, telling officers that his Staffordshire Bull Terrier had been sitting on the pedals. The judge said his tail was ludicrous.
Now, the festive season is fast approaching, of course, but for one family from the small town of Cinderford in the Forest of Dean, this will be their 12th Christmas without their dad. 32-year-old Sean James was knocked down and killed in what appeared to be a hit and run back in December of 2002. But this month, a cold case team has re-examined the investigation and uncovered that it was no accident after all. Sean James was murdered.
This is Cinderford, a former coal mining village on the eastern edge of the Forest of Dean. It's where local builder and father of three, Sean James, grew up and where he raised his family.
Just a real friendly bloke. Everyone liked him. Funny, bubbly, just always mucking about. He had loads of, like, he was real confident, he had loads of friends. He lived his life for his kids. Anything to try and make his kids laugh.
Cracking jokes, laughing, always, you know, always remember playing football, whether it was playing slam against the wall or going to a nice big field so we could boot it about and I'd make him run after the ball.
Because I was so young, I can't remember a lot. He used to always bring me sweets. And he used to bring his digger home from work. He used to take me and my friend on it.
He worked for a building company. Everyone said that he was one of the best workers, so he used to work really hard. He even wanted to start his own business. He was just lovely.
On Sunday the 15th of December 2002, Sean spent most of the afternoon in Cinderford's pubs.
What are you doing for Christmas then?
He ended up at his local, the Upper Bilson Inn.
He went out to meet his friends, weekend thing, go out and have a few drinks.
Hello, Ellen, is it all right?
It wasn't that unusual for Sean, but I knew he'd be home soon.
By late afternoon, Sean was the worse for wear.
Mark, all the best. See you later, boys. Take care, yeah?
And decided he'd had enough. Sean finished his drink and left the Upper Bilson Inn at around 6:45 p.m. He would have headed home in this direction, a journey which should have taken him just 10 minutes. But he never made it. Shortly after he left the pub, witnesses saw him talking to the driver of a white van in Valley Road. Police are unsure exactly what happened next, but they believe Sean was driven 3/4 of a mile in the van to a small lane on the edge of Cinderford. What followed was truly horrific. Somehow, he ended up lying in the middle of the road. After being deliberately run over, Sean became caught underneath the van. He was then dragged along the ground for 65 meters. Sean's lifeless body was discovered at around 7:05 p.m, just 10 minutes after he'd been seen talking to the van driver. Police initially treated his death as a chance hit and run, but his injuries were so severe they couldn't have been caused by a simple collision. Exactly what happened to Sean that night and how his body came to be found here remains a mystery. But one thing police can now be sure of is that this was no accident. Sean James was murdered, and 12 years on, his family need answers.
The day that Sean died, we all died. And even though it's been 12 years, it's not a day that goes by that we don't think about him.
I just thought he was always going to come home. I couldn't get over the fact that he was gone. And how could he been?
It's been really, really hard. I always think, like, Christmas time, whoever done it is probably with their family. And their kids have got everything they want. They lost everything, Jess lost everything when their dad died.
It's never going to bring him back. It's, you know, finding someone isn't ever going to help with him actually not being here, but it brings justice. It's a bit of closure.
Well, DCI Steve Porter joins me now. A very, very sad case. These are kids who've grown up, well, they're bigger now, but they've grown up without a father for all that time. Why wasn't it treated as murder at the time?
Well, there was certainly lots of speculation back in 2002. However, all the evidence suggested that Sean had been hit by a vehicle which had failed to stop. The case, though, it's never been closed to us, and our recent review, looking at all the information that's come back to us over the years, together with a very detailed forensic reconstruction, it's let us reach a very different conclusion. We're now convinced that Sean was murdered.
Right, that's what cold case reviews are for, I guess. Let's just go through exactly what you know about his movements on the night then.
OK, what we do know is that Sean had been drinking that afternoon, and he left the Upper Bilson public house in Valley Road, Cinderford, on Sunday the 15th of December 2002 to take the walk home, which was about 10 minutes away. The very last sighting of Sean was talking to the driver of a large white van which was travelling towards him from his home address in Valley Road. Sean's body was found about 10 minutes later in a lane off of Steam Mills Road. Now, shortly before this, there was a further sighting of a large white van leaving the lane at speed. I don't believe the two sightings of this white van, firstly in Valley Road and secondly where Sean's body was found in Steam Mills Road, is a coincidence.
There were, is this right, some of Sean's possessions then were found by that pub that he first left?
Yes, that's right. Sean's tobacco pouch and one of his shoes was found in the middle of Valley Road in almost the identical spot to where he was seen talking to the driver of this large white van. Now, where Sean's body was found was about 3/4 of a mile away in the opposite direction. There's just no way that he could have walked there in the time span available, particularly as he was only wearing one shoe. What I believe happened is something's occurred there in Valley Road involving the driver of the white van. Sean has then been taken to the lane off of Steam Mills Road where he's been deliberately run over and killed.
OK, DCI Steve Porter, thank you very much for now. Those children grown up now, well, they had to grow up without their father. They know that there are people in that community who can tell them what happened to their dad. If you are one of those people, I would urge you to come forward, call the studio now. It's the usual number, 0500 600 600, or of course you could speak anonymously if you prefer to Crime Stoppers. Let me give you their number, 0800 555 111. Right, still to come tonight, the hunt for a gang who raped a 17-year-old walking home from a night out with friends.
It makes me so angry to think that one of the group didn't step in to stop the others. Surely one of them would have realised that what they were doing was wrong.
And how groundbreaking forensic techniques helped nail a serial killer.
DNA was found within 3 knots. It had been protected for 37 years. We were left in absolutely no doubt that that evidence identified the killer.
That's coming very soon, but first Martin has his latest batch of CCTV.
Yes, and we start with a really nasty attack at a betting shop in Milton Keynes. 2 men sit playing a gaming machine at a bookies just before closing time in July this year. The staff member comes from behind the protective screen to tell them it's time to leave, but they're having none of it. The man in the distinctive white tracksuit suddenly hits out, knocking the victim to the floor. He then drags him to the back of the shop, where his accomplice joins in, kicking the terrified worker. He puts up a brave fight as the men throw more punches in an attempt to get the keys to the office. Once inside, the beating continues, and the pair help themselves to around £400 from the tills. The employee was left with horrific bruising and a punctured lung, and was so traumatized he's now moved away from the area. Time to shop the tracksuit-wearing thugs responsible. Names, please. It's the early hours of a Sunday morning in December last year, and these grainy images show a woman returning to her home in East London. She stands next to the communal entrance of a block of flats as she searches for her keys. But she's not alone. This man starts to harass her. She wants nothing to do with him, but he won't take no for an answer. He tries to kiss her a number of times. She attempts to fight him off. He's persistent though, and keeps trying. During this struggle, the victim is subjected to a serious sexual assault. He only leaves when the traumatized woman tries to phone for help. The victim says her attacker was missing an upper incisor tooth and was balding. Police believe this is him just minutes earlier. Can you help find him? A Tuesday night in October at the high noon services at Simmons Yacht in Herefordshire, and we're about to witness a highway robbery. The crooks roll into town in a Mitsubishi Pajero 4x4. They get out, one armed with a large long-barreled shotgun, and rush into the service station. Once inside, they round up the terrified staff and march them towards the tills. They hand over a shopping bag and demand it's filled with the day's takings. One stands over the worker, checking the entire safe is emptied. In total, they take thousands of pounds, including the small change. They then make their getaway. Back into the 4x4 and head north on the A40. Can you put names to these gun-toting outlaws and get them behind bars where they belong? If you need another look, all the CCTV is on the website. Call and text the numbers on screen if you can help.
Now, although crime is falling overall, the number of rapes reported to and recorded by police in England and Wales is at its highest ever level. That's according to official figures. The rise has, in part, been put down to a greater willingness of victims to come forward. Well, tonight we're appealing for your help after one young woman did just that and reported her horrific ordeal of being raped by a gang. It happened just a few weeks ago in Cardiff.
Part of me wants to move on from this, but part of me wants to hate the people responsible. I just want to know why this gang thought that what they were doing was okay. All I did was walk home.
I know.
I was meeting with two friends that night. We meet up regularly. We were just having some food and some drinks, a catch-up.
I think got 5 minutes for me to make a move.
At closing time, we left the pub. One of my friends got a lift, and I was with my other friend.
Text me when you get home,
Yes,
okay?
I will. See you later.
Then, at the corner by the school, we went our separate ways. It's a journey I know well. College Road is a long road, a well-lit road, a busy road. I walked by a group outside the shop on College Road.
Boys.
Two of them had bikes, one was cycling round in the road. They were shouting stuff at me and laughing between themselves, so I glared at them, because I thought they were laughing at me. I can't remember saying anything to them. I felt intimidated. They were so close and being quite aggressive, and I was really worried about what would happen.
Come with us.
I just remember trying to walk straight, trying to ignore them, but before I could think about anything, I was in the park. By the time they were spinning me around, I didn't have time to think. I remember falling, catching myself with my hands before I hit the grass. I was on my front, and I could just see one of them stood in front of me. I could just see his legs and trainers. I was angry. I was upset because I knew something bad was happening, but I couldn't do anything about it. My underwear was pulled down with my jeans, and then one of them came behind me. He came behind me and raped me. I tried to push him off me, and then one of them pulled my hair to the side, and then another one of them went over me, and he raped me too. I couldn't push him off because he was too heavy, so I just stopped fighting. I just lay there. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't find my key when I got to the house. So I hid in the garage, and then I rang my sister. I just want to know why this gang thought that what they were doing was okay, and if they were sorry for what they did to me. It makes me so angry to think that one of the group didn't step in to stop the others. Surely one of them would have realized that what they were doing was wrong. Surely one of them should have said stop or reported it to the police. I wonder how long it will be before I'm normal again. I just want to go back to the way I was before.
Well, DI Lloyd Williams is leading this investigation. You think that actually important information could come from somebody in the gang itself tonight?
Yes, it may be. It's some of a group of bystanders to attack and feel they can't come forward. What I say now is come forward, tell us what's happened, give your version. All calls can be treated confidentially. I urge you to think about what the victim has gone through that night.
Indeed. Do you think anybody in that gang would have confided in people in their wider circle?
Yes, definitely. If someone's confided in you, even as a bystander, please think what the victim's gone through and come forward.
Can you just talk us through this brave young woman's journey on the night? Where did she go?
Yeah, she was in the Pineapple Public House on Llandaff North. She's left there around midnight with her friends. She's walked along Station Road to Glantaff School, where her friends parted. She then continued to walk along Cabathra Avenue, up College Road, where she's been approached by the group of 5 to 6 males on Colwinston Street. He said one was on a BMX and one was on a mountain bike. They were all dressed in black, apart from one who was wearing grey. Obviously, I want to hear from anyone who remembers that gang in that area on the 16th to 17th of October.
Right, really important. As we saw in the reconstruction, that this poor young woman lost her key, and actually that could prove important.
Yeah, she's lost a distinctive key, which is black in colour with coloured arrows on it, similar to the one being shown. I want to know exactly where she's lost it and keen to retrieve it. OK,
DI Williams, thank you very much for updating us on this case. If you were with that group that night, then it is time for you to come forward. Do the right thing. Pick up the phone tonight. It's 0500 600 600, as usual, for the studio. And remember, if you've been a victim of crime yourself, there's always the victim support line. That's on 0845 30 30 900.
More faces now, starting with Paul John Scott. The National Crime Agency wants to speak to the 32-year-old in connection with a conspiracy to import Class A drugs from South and Central America into the UK. The Spanish authorities also want to talk to him about the murder of a British man in Spain earlier this year. Scott speaks with a Liverpudlian accent and, as well as Spain, has links to the Netherlands, Belgium and France. He's considered to be dangerous and should not be approached. Next up is 43-year-old Kenneth Frank Simmons. He was given an indeterminate prison sentence back in 2008 for grievous bodily harm after he stabbed another man. But Simmons escaped from prison in October this year. He has a number of tattoos, including a panther's head on his forearm and the words Rory and Chelsea on his right arm and Sarah Jane on his shoulder. He has links to the Sutton and Battersea areas of London and is known to sleep rough. Number 7 is this man, Desmond David Luke Rosario, although he may also be using the surname Cruz. The 46-year-old failed to appear in court in June this year in connection with a sex assault on a teenager in Sheffield. Rosario has links to Canada and across Europe. He's a barrister and police believe he may be seeking to work in a similar field. And finally, we have Andrew John Griffin, but he also calls himself David Clayton, Mark Wood or Steve Clark. He was jailed for 4 years in June for 17 counts of fraud, but didn't turn up for sentencing and has been on the run ever since. Over £100,000 worth of stolen property was recovered from Griffin's flat, and it's believed he's responsible for more than £300,000 of fraud using a fake BT website. 45-year-old Griffin has links to the Bristol area and is said to speak with a home county's accent. Call and text on the usual numbers if you recognise any of tonight's faces, and of course, they're all online.
Right, still to come tonight, the incredible ingenuity of detectives and forensic scientists determined to prove who was responsible for the World's End murders.
We found skin cells on the inside of the clothing. Those cells were the unique DNA that we needed.
But first, it's time for an update on previous cases.
We start with the death of pensioner Bertie Atchison, which we featured back in May 2012. 72-year-old Bertie and his wife were woken in the early hours of the 30th of April that year by the sound of breaking glass at their home in Coleraine in County Londonderry. He went to investigate and came face to face with the intruder who demanded money. Bertie then suffered a fatal heart attack in a scuffle with the robber, who escaped with £335 from his disabled wife's purse. It's a terrible case, but you'll be pleased to know that 41-year-old Paul Toland from Antrim recently pleaded guilty to Bertie's manslaughter and robbery and is due to be sentenced any day. Toland had been to the house a few weeks earlier to repair the couple's vacuum cleaner, but returned to carry out the robbery after Bertie paid him using cash he kept around the house.
Next, you may remember we showed you this shocking CCTV of an attack on a man in a hotel foyer in London in March this year. He'd been targeted by a gang, so he took refuge in a nearby hotel, but they followed him inside, where they beat him unconscious, one using a skateboard. Well, after we showed those horrific images, 19-year-old Sermet Hassan handed himself in that very same evening. 18-year-old Joseph Tanti was arrested a week later, and 18-year-old Morgan Stripling was arrested soon after. Just over 2 weeks ago, the trio were jailed for a total of 21 years for the attack. The judge said the defendants showed total savagery and a disregard for life, and the victim is lucky to have survived the attack.
Now, thanks to your calls, this man, 54-year-old David Bentley, is now serving life in prison. Several viewers got in touch after we showed this CCTV of an armed robbery at a travel agent's in Caterham in Surrey in July of last year. Now, Bentley was found guilty of this armed robbery and 3 others in September and sentenced to serve a minimum of 14 years.
Finally, updates on a couple of wanted faces. This man, John Boy Ward, appeared on the programme back in May last year. The 32-year-old was wanted for the murder of his second cousin, Thomas Ward, who was shot dead at the door of his caravan in front of his wife and baby daughter in Stevenage in Hertfordshire. Well, you'll be pleased to know that your calls helped police track John Boy to Denmark, and he's now been given a mandatory life sentence with a minimum term of 32 years.
And we end with another great result on the faces. This man, Johan Smit, who is also known as Damien Duvaldor, was featured back in April, wanted for the possession and distribution of indecent images of children. Well, as a direct result of your information, he was traced to Istanbul, and just a few weeks ago he was jailed for 3 years and placed on the sex offenders register indefinitely. Fantastic work, and as ever, all thanks to your calls.
Great stuff. Now let's see if you can do the same for our next batch of CCTV, starting with an unprovoked attack on a man outside a restaurant in Surrey. It's March this year and a man steps out from a tapas bar in Purley for a smoke. The problem is, he hasn't brought any with him. He hangs around and a few minutes later another smoker walks out of the restaurant. Our man, wearing a flat cap and jumper, hassles him for a free cigarette. He seems to have something of a smoking habit as he follows the victim around demanding to catch a smoke, but gets nowhere. He isn't giving up though and continues to harangue the diner for a free fag. Suddenly he lashes out, punching the victim straight in the face before walking away, leaving onlookers to help the injured smoker. Someone knows who this cheapskate thug is. Help police stub out his violent behavior and give us his name. It's shortly before 4 a.m. and this fast food restaurant has closed for the night. But it doesn't stop these men desperate for a takeaway. It's not the burgers they're after though, it's the safe with the takings. But it's fixed to the floor. Still, these hamburglers have come prepared. They try to jack up the safe, but it just won't budge. And whoops, one of the gang has forgotten to cover his face. They try again, and again, for almost 6 minutes. With the safe still stuck, they decide to go large, bringing in a pallet truck for a drive-through. But even this isn't going to detach the safe from its fixings on the floor. With the chips down, a third man in a black top comes in to help. And between them, they finally manage to get the safe away. That's £15,000 to go. Detectives would be loving it if you could tell us who these fast food felons are. Names, please. Now, look and listen to this one carefully. It's strange to say the least. A man walks into a shop in North London in September. As he passes the shopkeeper, he touches him on the arm and then waits. He gestures with his hand, and somehow the victim seems mesmerized. Our tricky thief then heads for the shop worker's pocket, taking his wallet. He touches his spellbound victim in a bizarre sequence of moves, talking all the time, with the worker turning to face him. Whilst he remains rooted to the spot, the crook goes in for a second time, stealing the day's takings from the other pocket. It's only when he leaves that the shopkeeper realizes what's happened. Use your powers and tell us who this persuasive pickpocket is. Well, if you can name anyone featured in tonight's CCTV, please get in touch in the usual ways. And of course, all the information is on the website.
Now, finally tonight, a case that until recently was one of Britain's most infamous unsolved crimes. The murder of two 17-year-old friends following a night out at the World's End pub in Edinburgh triggered an enormous police investigation which would span decades and spur comparisons to the Yorkshire Ripper. Well, thanks to tireless detective work and incredible breakthroughs in forensic science, it finally ended last month with the conviction of a man believed to be Scotland's most prolific serial killer.
Helen Scott and Christine Eady, two young lives brought to a brutal end in 1977.
What they went through must have been horrific.
37 years after they died, serial killer Angus Sinclair has been found guilty of torturing, raping and murdering the 17-year-olds.
You have displayed not 1 ounce of remorse for these terrible deeds.
It brings to an historic conclusion one of the country's most notorious crimes. Helen and Christine had been friends through school in the city of Edinburgh. Christine was a typist who came from a loving family. Helen had hopes of pursuing a career in childcare.
She was a shy girl. She wasn't a dressy girl. I always said she was more a tomboy.
Helen was nearly 6 years older than I, but she was just such a caring person. Just so many fun memories of Helen.
On the night of October the 15th, 1977, the girls went with friends to the World's End pub on Edinburgh's Royal Mile.
I'll see you later. Bye. Bye. See you.
Witnesses said two men had been there chatting with them. The four left the pub together. It was the last time Helen and Christine were seen alive.
The first person to be found was Christine at a beach at Gosford in East Lothian. She was naked, apart from bindings to her wrists and also ligatures around her neck. Helen was about 7 miles away. She was abandoned in a field, and she had some of her clothing still on, but she similarly had bindings on her wrist and also ligatures around her neck. This was a terrifying inquiry, something I'd never seen in this area ever before.
They wanted me to go to the mortuary to identify her. That'll stay in my mind for the rest of my days.
One of my most vivid memories is just sitting at the bottom of the stairs looking at the front door, thinking Helen's never going to walk through that door again.
The men seen with the girls that night were the prime suspects. In those days, technology was limited, and despite following up hundreds of leads, the killers remained at large. Detectives were eventually forced to scale the inquiry down. While Christine's loved ones grieved privately, Helen's parents gave interviews on behalf of both families. This footage was recorded just weeks before Helen's mother died in 1989.
But my last words to her were, I'll strive for the rest of my days to try and get justice for Helen. And she passed away just after that.
In 1996, almost 20 years after the murders, DNA technology was emerging as a modern crime-fighting tool. Scientists looked again at the coat Helen had worn that night. The carefully preserved evidence at last gave detectives their first breakthrough, a full DNA profile.
We entered the profile onto the National DNA database, but nothing was returned.
They continued to search for a match, and by 2003 were ready to make an appeal on Crimewatch.
What we hope to do at this phase is widen our search for him and perhaps identify him through his family.
And this is a new development in DNA,
a new development.
isn't it?
It's called familial searching.
Meanwhile, Helen's coat was tested yet again to see if it might yield any more clues.
We didn't just find one sample that we'd found before, we found 2 samples.
And the second profile gave a name: Angus Sinclair. A dangerous killer and convicted paedophile, he was already in jail serving 2 life sentences. And he was now firmly in the frame for the World's End murders. What officers still didn't know was who the first sample found on Helen's coat belonged to. An investigation of the people Sinclair knew in 1977 led them to this man, Gordon Hamilton, Sinclair's brother-in-law. But he had died in 1996, leaving no obvious way for police to obtain a DNA sample.
We want to get a photograph of this before we go any further.
Hamilton was a painter and decorator, so officers visited a house where he had worked.
We found skin cells on the inside of the clothing. Those cells were the unique DNA that we needed to relate to Gordon Hamilton.
Police finally had their two suspects. Crimewatch was with the team when they interviewed Angus Sinclair in 2005.
He made no comments through the entire interview, which lasted many hours.
You are not responsible for this crime, which you told us.
It was unsatisfying, but there was still sufficient evidence at that time for us to charge him with the murders of both Christine and Helen.
In 2007, Angus Sinclair went on trial for the World's End murders. But in a development that sent shockwaves through Scotland, the case was thrown out of court when the judge decided there was insufficient evidence.
You didn't know where you were going to go now, and I thought, oh, my promises have gone. It's never going to happen.
At the time, under Scottish law, a person could not be tried for the same crime twice. Many believe Sinclair had evaded justice.
Well, I think there was a lot of public disquiet about the result of the 2007 case.
It prompted a change of the law relating to double jeopardy.
Scotland modernised its legal system to allow, under certain limited circumstances, acquittals to be set aside and retrials ordered.
4 years after he was acquitted, Sinclair could be considered a suspect once more, but only if new evidence came to light that was not available before. Once again, detectives turned to experts at the cutting edge of forensics to re-examine the evidence. They used a new tool called Crime Light.
We recognised that potentially the ligatures could hold the key to success here. Painstakingly photographing, drawing, and then slowly unpicking, cutting away the knots. They start to analyse, searching for DNA.
And what scientists found astonished investigators. Unlike earlier techniques, they were now able to see DNA in situ, allowing them to interpret exactly how it had got there.
Sinclair's DNA was found within 3 knots, which meant that it had been protected for 37 years and must have been there at the time the knots were being tied. The results were truly staggering. We were left in absolutely no doubt that evidence identified the killer of Christine and Helen.
Earlier this year, the request for Scotland's first ever court case under the new double jeopardy law was granted. It took a jury just 2 hours to find Angus Sinclair guilty.
I sentence you to life imprisonment to run from today, and I fix the punishment part at 37 years.
37 years, the longest ever punishment handed down in a Scottish court, matching the time it had taken to bring Sinclair to justice.
The girls didn't have a voice, but forensic science was their voice because it told the jury what had happened.
This irrefutable evidence was only made possible by the diligent police teams that worked on the case across nearly 4 decades.
Despite countless examinations and the handling, there was no contamination.
Their care allowed the scientists of this modern day and age to prove who the killers of Christine and Helen were.
If nothing else, the girls and my mother can now truly rest in peace.
You've brought a child up and she's just starting out in life, really, 17-year-old. And it's stolen, it's just taken away from them. Christine the same. They'll never leave me, never.
Just heartbreaking and utterly horrifying, the whole thing.
Yes, horrifying, and it's a fraction of the crimes he committed. He almost certainly murdered 4 other women in Glasgow. He was already serving life for a series of rapes and sexual assaults. He killed, for the first time at 16, a girl of 7. A psychiatrist said then he is obsessed with sex, and given the minimum of opportunity, he will repeat these offences.
It was science then that trapped him, but it was really the detectives at the heart of it.
Yes, it was almost personal. Police, prosecutors, the forensic scientists who worked the case, they all saw themselves as custodians of the evidence, and it was that evidence that gave them the answers. The clothing, the ligatures, it gave them the answers, the DNA. After nearly 40 years, it was astonishing. And that change of law on double jeopardy, that was also crucial, and it gave the families some justice. But Helen's dad said, after the case finished, he could never get closure, he said, because he could never forget seeing what Sinclair had actually done to his daughter. That one sentence gives you a tiny glimpse of the enormity of the suffering for the families.
It does. Thank you, Matthew. Just time now then for a final check on your calls tonight. Here's Martin.
Well, we've had excellent response to some of the reconstructions we've shown you tonight. The Charlene Downs murder, really positive calls coming in, including a couple of very interesting lines of inquiry. And the murder of Sean James down in Cinderford, again, excellent information that's come through, which detectives are acting on as we speak. And the first of the wanted faces we showed you, Kevin Okoro, a couple of new sightings, again, police acting on those. Please keep your calls coming in, they're absolutely vital.
Now, just before we go, we thought you might like to know that this year we have featured 130 appeals, and amazingly your calls have helped with 110 arrests of suspected criminals so far. Your information has also led to convictions of people for murder, child abuse, armed robbery, rape and many, many other offences. Thank you so much for all of your calls. All of tonight's appeals, including the Instant Room phone numbers, are on the Crimewatch website, and you can keep up to date with how our cases are progressing on Twitter. Follow @BBC Crimewatch. Well, the phone lines stay open until midnight tomorrow, and we'll be back with an update after the news tonight at 10:35. The viewers in Northern Ireland are going to have to wait until 12:10. But for now, from everyone here, thanks very much for watching and calling. Bye-bye.